All right, good afternoon, everyone. We're going to start in just 1 second. We've got the room starting to fill up, so we'll start in 1 minute. All right, well, let's go ahead and get started. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Steve Jurch, and I am the Associate Vice President of the Center for Policy and Practice at ACCT. Thank you for joining us for this discussion today to talk about an important topic and share lessons learned, research evidence, and program and policy implications from the College Belonging Connection for Families Initiative, or CBCF. Before we get started, I want to talk about a couple of housekeeping items. We are recording this session, and the recording and slide deck will be sent to the registrants as well as posted on our website. We will have time at the end for questions, and I will be monitoring the chat function. So if you would like to ask a question, please use that. So support for parenting students is a critical need for those who seek to enroll and complete post-secondary education. You will hear more about this later, but about 1 in 5 undergraduates is a parenting student, with just about half of those enrolled at a community or technical college. Parenting students are juggling a wide variety of priorities and are vulnerable to stopping out, so creating a connection to their institution is important for their success. This initiative brought together a leadership team and advisory working group of established experts from the different facets of the project that included researchers on student-parent success and family-centered program evaluation. So with us today, we have Therese Sommer and Lauren Teague from Northwestern. Researchers on identity and belonging. So we have Mesmin Destin, also from Northwestern, and Ani Rogers of University of Chicago. We have parenting students with lived experience, Micah Jordan and Jessica Ingstrom. We have researchers on belonging and post-secondary success, Royelle Johnson from USC. Community college leaders, Jabet Lozapone from Montgomery College. Policy directors, Carrie Welton from Trellis Strategies, and representatives of community colleges, Steve Jurch from ACCT. So in 2024, the advisory group created a national request for application process, and 3 community colleges were selected by Northwestern University to participate in the inaugural CBCF cohort. So for their participation, colleges received $30,000 to develop and implement activities and resources for student parents and their families, technical guidance from a team of national advisors, research support through survey and focus group data collection with student parents and staff, and collaborative peer learning opportunities within the cohort. Now, all of the colleges that were selected had already invested in parenting students at their institutions, so this was not new to them, and they were motivated to expand the work that they were doing. As part of the project, all colleges created a student parent advisory working group with at least one student parent, a faculty member, an administrator who manages and or leads programs and policies for parenting students. So after the process of the application, the 3 colleges that were selected were Bright Point Community College in Virginia, College of Menominee Nation in Wisconsin, and Sinclair Community College in Ohio. You can see that 2 of these institutions were medium-sized, and they were similar in size to each other, with a similar percentage of student parents, and 1 is much smaller but had a higher percentage of student parents. So before we hear from the project team and learn about the research and the findings, I want to turn it over to one of the supporters of the project, Amber Angel from the ECMC Foundation, herself a former parenting student, to talk about why this work is important. Amber?
Thanks, Steve. And hi, everyone. It's so nice to see so many familiar names in the chat and so many new ones, which is exciting. So I'm Amber Angel. I lead the work at ECMC Foundation for parenting student success. And I've been a long time admirer of Teresa's work and the 2Gen Cap Tulsa that dates back 15 years. Um, when I think back to me when I was a single mom in college and I was going from class to a bathroom stall with a cooler pumping breast milk and feeling super alone next to 18-year-olds. And um, I always considered I use this term of like PCP student. It was parking lot class, parking lot. And the data there has been data that shows there is data that shows that student parents have a higher GPA than their non-parenting peers because when we're spending time away from our kids, we're doing it for a reason. But there was this disconnect of like not really feeling like I belonged and not feeling like I ever saw anybody that looked like me do something that I was doing and wanting to maybe hide that identity or feel shame in it. And so I've just been really thrilled to work with Teresa and Lauren on this project in particular, Laura, sorry, because we need to see the data. And, Mesman has brought that. And I'm really thrilled for this webinar and for you all to be here and to care about this work because it matters greatly. And I think when we think about student parents, there's just all these different cross-sector identities. And so with that, I will pass it to Therese to unpack some of the findings from this project. And again, really grateful to be able to be in community with you all.
Thank you so much, Amber, for your wisdom and your insights as an expert in parenting students and their college and family experiences. You've been with us from the very beginning. We also are grateful to ECMC Foundation for their investment and their belief in us and this team and this work. And we also want to thank Annie E. Casey Foundation, particularly for their investment around the child aspect for parenting students, and for Mickelson 20mm Foundation. So as you have heard, Lauren and I co-direct something at Northwestern called the Northwestern Two-Generation Research Initiative. So we want to start by putting the parenting student movement in the context of the two-generation field. So first, I'm just going to start with a definition. We define a two-generation approach as investments in quality and intensive education services for parents and children in the same family at the same time. And this is ultimately with the goal of advancing economic mobility for families. So we know from theory and empirical evidence that this is an approach that has great promise and in many cases works. We know that education itself is one of the strongest predictors of income for anyone. We also know that education and income are significantly linked to the achievement of children in their education. And importantly, we know that parents' education, again, when it's quality and intensive, combined with children's education that's quality and intensive, that leads to social mobility. So, of course, your grandmother could tell you that parents influence children and children influence parents. But in academic terms, we call this dual development theory. And this is the idea that the development of adults and children are intertwined and bidirectional. And so the goal, just to remember for this work, is to really maximize the developmental potential of both adults and children. It's not just focused on one or the other generation. So I also just want to note, it's not on the slide, but we at NU2Gen and others have developed a growing body of evidence around two-generation programs, and we compare two-generation investments to single-generation investments. And we've seen really positive outcomes for parents who are in these two-gen programs, having higher educational levels, better psychological well-being, and we're even seeing for some subgroups improved economic well-being as well. For children, when their parents are in school, this can mean increased attendance and lower chronic absence, which is a growing problem. So back to just parenting students, you've heard Steve say this. We know that they're a critical subpopulation of college students. They represent about 20% of undergrads in higher education. That's about 3 million students. And about half of them are enrolled in community college institutions, so we know that's absolutely essential. And almost half of them are parents of very young children. So we know they're thinking of the development and care of their very young children while also working and in school. And almost 3/4 of them are mothers. So a 2-gen approach for us has a set of guiding principles that we know also applies to the CBCF initiative and the role of belonging for parenting students. First, children are a motivator, not a barrier, as it's often seen in workforce training programs to parenting student success. We also know at the same time, as Amber mentioned earlier, a key barrier to parenting students and their families are feeling isolated and disconnected on campus. And we know from the larger literature of people like Mesman, Destin, and others that the experiences of belonging, support, and connection are protective factors against many of these life stressors that we know individuals are experiencing and their families. And we also know they're related to positive academic outcomes. So from an ecological perspective, an individual's development is influenced by a series of interconnected environmental systems. I know that's small on this graphic, but you can see the interconnected nature. And these systems range from the very immediate. We know our family, our community, our peers that are essential to our own growth and development, but also to remember the broader, the economic and political structures. So from the very start of this project, we have focused on the importance of belonging and how it relates across these systems. So experts like Royal Johnson, from whose work we draw this figure, and Mesman as well, we know that belonging, if we're going to address it, must be fostered across these many levels, not just at the individual level. So for example, here you see at the microsystem, it's important to do things like establish peer mentoring cohorts and social learning spaces to reduce isolation. We know here at the exosystem level, we want to guarantee access to basic needs. We know it's critical that you're not going to feel if you belong if you don't have enough to eat, a good place to live, and quality health care. And then as an example, at the larger chronosystem level, we want to promote equity policies and foster governance structures rather than just individual leaders and policy cycles. You know, this is really about long-term systemic change. So at present, there's little to no research on belonging for this really important subgroup, parenting students. But we're going to see in the rest of this talk today how it's emerging. And so we're going to start right now with the folks at Sinclair Community College in Dayton, Ohio, who are investing in parenting students and actually helping them become more visible to faculty, staff, and students on their campus. So now we have with us today Allie Hawley, Myra Bozeman, and our own Lauren Ty as an advisory team lead.
Okay. Okay, Allie and Myra, feel free to take it away.
Okay, I guess I can start talking a little bit about the first bullet point as we think about the new resource or the activity that we decided to engage in. Even before we began the project, our initial goal was to introduce study carrels as a way to create a more inclusive and child-friendly campus environment. So at first, we focused primarily on how they would support student parents. However, through conversations with other institutions that are participating in the grant, our perspective expanded. We began thinking more strategically about factors such as durability, maintenance, and long-term sustainability. We also learned about initiatives like the expected parent signage that we now have in our parking garage as an idea from another institution that would help us in recognizing that our students are both meaningful and that they need an easy and adaptable campus. I think what's also funny about this first bullet is that just last month, Allie and I were talking, and I was telling her, I said, Allie, I don't even know if people notice those study carrels. We don't have a sign in or sign out sheet. How do we know if they even use it? And then that same day, maybe 2 hours later, during our president's town hall, one of the first pictures he had up on his PowerPoint presentation was our study carrel. And he made it a point to recognize our team because he described it as being unique. He described it as being forward thinking, and it really reaffirmed that this work is both visible and it is valued at the institutional level.
Moving on to our second point, I think this is where we really got excited because I think in the past we've really struggled with who are our student parents. We had typical identification as far as FAFSA and self-disclosure, and then anecdotally walking through the halls. But what we very much appreciated about being a part of this project is the systematic way of us identifying our student parents. And based upon the research, we were able to see in our population that most of our parenting students had school-age children, which is going to affect additional work that we look to do when it comes to have not only children on campus, but a flexible attendance policy when schools are closed down. About 3 weeks ago, Myra, we had a huge snowstorm that came through and schools were shut down for a week. And making our faculty and staff aware of that our students are primarily parenting school-age children was crucial to supporting those students and ensuring that they could have access to work or ability to connect with various resources. So right now we are focusing on developing different strategies to better support our student parents with older children. We are a part of the C Campus grant, so we do participate in that as well. So we are able to support parenting students with infants up to, I want to say 5th grade. But now we're looking to see what can we do to support. So one thing that we really focused on was during our fall time, we hosted a trunk or treat event. But it wasn't just to pass out candy, it was also to expose our parenting students and their children to the joys that is community college and what all they could experience. So I would say the most attended activity that we had in there is we had students from our chemistry club come and demonstrate how to make ice cream out of liquid nitrogen and household items and things you can find in your pantry. They did 2 demonstrations, and I want to say we had probably close to total 50 people watching that, and just really watching it come alive, and for kids to really see that college is not just going to class, but it is really a community, was definitely very impactful for our team.
And then as we get to the last bullet, yes, our Sync Campus grant was renewed. Yes. As we think about the last bullet, which we think about the policy change, again, at the very beginning, we had one idea of what we wanted to look at. And I even brought this same idea up in different strategic planning sessions I was in across campus. And that idea was, are student parents allowed to bring their children to class if they need to, if there's an emergency situation? And so what we learned was, of course, they really shouldn't bring their children to class, even if it's an emergency. But many of our faculty members were allowing students to bring their children to class if it was an emergency. Now, kind of referring back to what Ali brought up, the recent snowstorm that we had was really eye-opening for us because it really shifted our thinking. Because again, all of our local public schools were closed, but our college was open, and it did create a significant challenge for our student parents. So what we were faced with was, why are we trying to force them to put the children in the classroom when we can be a lot more, I guess, flexible in allowing our student parents to not be in the classroom, to allow them to be home with their children and still get their work done and still not have any points taken off, all of those things. And so we had to kind of flip it a bit and then think about, how can we talk to administration? How can we talk to faculty? And how can they help us in thinking of practical and sustainable ways to support student success?
We've also included in our initial student intake survey for our student information system for students to self-disclose that they are a student parent. And we are looking at a full launch of that survey here over the next 6 months with the majority of our students in that application. So we're really excited to see that. And I think too, something that Myra and I have been able to share is not only students are aware that children are welcome on campus, but they know who to contact now should something arise, Myra and I and the rest of our committee has become the go-to place. And recently I've been able to coach a new mother with a 6-month-old baby who is in one of our nursing programs and helping to support her not only with other resources here on campus, but just general study tips of, carry your baby around or read your textbook to your baby. And I think that's been really powerful for us is now people know where to go, when to ask for help, and if they need resources. And we look forward to our next kind of adventures with this.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Myra and Allie. So I was the team lead for the Sinclair Community College Committee. And, hard to summarize over like basically 2 years of working together in a few minutes. But there's 3 things that I really want to uplift about the Sinclair group. The first is their just tenacity and flexibility. And the way that they can adapt, their adaptability. So, like Myra said, they came into the project wanting to do study carols. And we were all like, great idea, right? Let's get the kids in the library. Let's have parents have a safe space to go. So many bureaucratic issues that we could have never imagined. Allie had identified the carols. Then the college says, we don't want those carols. You have to go through procurement. Then she gets the carols. Then they say facilities has to put these together. Where are you going to put them? Who's going to move it? Who's going to move everything? So there was all of just like these little road bumps that this group did not let them slow them down at all. And they were also, with that, they were also very flexible about changing their ideas, and they were able to look at the data and look at our research and change their strategies like they brought up as to like what they were going to do going forward. So they had these initial ideas, they saw them play out, but then going forward, they're like, we can be flexible and we can be accommodating to our student parents. The next thing that I think they did really, really well is that their committee was, first of all, so dedicated, but they were very good at using existing people and resources within that committee. So a lot of times people would be like, at the library, we can do this, or at our childcare center, we can do this. Oh, I can help with that. So they did a really good job, like bringing the right people together and everyone taking ownership of the project and sharing the responsibility. And then lastly, I was really excited with, I hope this is true for all of the colleges, but how influential the data was, particularly at the leadership and the institutional level. So we did create slides for every college that were unique to their college, so that they could share them with the leaders, the faculty, the community, staff, et cetera. And I really am proud of the way that Sinclair received that data. And like Myra said, it did seems like it reached the right people, and that change will continue after this initiative is over. So it was a pleasure to work with the Sinclair team. And now I will turn it over to Bright Point Community College, which is led by Katrina Bailey. And Jabet Lazapone will be the advisory member speaking, but I also want to shout out Jessica Ingstrom, who was the team lead there. And Bright Point really focused on creating community, similar to what I just said, amongst parenting students, but also reaching the leaders, reaching the presidents, reaching the admin. So I will let them take it away.
Thank you, Lauren. I'm Katrina Bailey from Bright Point Community College. With funding from this collaboration, we were able to present a film viewing and discussion of the Raising Up Student Parent film series. The series of films aimed a light on the numerous unique barriers that student parents face. Our event brought together student parents, faculty, staff, and senior leadership of the college to watch and discuss the issues raised in the films that student parents face every day as they navigate their roles as parents, members of the workforce, and members of our campus communities. After the event, a member of the senior leadership team came to me to say how important the conversation was for them in unlocking their further understanding of the barriers that student parents face and ways that they could work to build support mechanisms into the system to help them thrive. It made me feel really good that I had done that, and it made me feel like I had planted a seed for further change. We were also able to connect with our student parents through on-campus events such as a vision board and mocktail hour event, winter holiday hot chocolate and family-friendly activity event, and our now annual kids back to school pop-up closet and supply event. I started that event previous to this initiative, but it was very well received, and we wanted to continue it. And because of the funding, we were able to add extra resources such as snacks and food, takeaway food, and extra school supplies for students and their kids. BrightPoint students are spread throughout urban, suburban, and rural communities in our service region. Some of these communities are considered childcare deserts, and while others, there are no slots available or families have just been priced out of care. Many of our student parents want to be a part of our campus community by attending events or taking classes online or on campus. They don't feel connected to the campus if they're not here for different things, such as classes and events, and they see these things that are being marketed to them, but they can't always come. They feel they face a stigma for having to bring their children to events, and they also have that kind of, I've had students state to me previously that they want to feel as though they belong here, but they feel that they cannot fully participate. And another thing that I hear a lot is, I really just want to have an adult conversation without being interrupted a million times by my kids while I'm having that adult conversation, which I can completely relate to. So to encourage our student parents to have these adult conversations, we're launching a parenting support group in collaboration with our Families First of Chesterfield County. Families First is our home visiting program in the county, and they work with families 0 to 5. BrightPoint is going to supply space to meet in an adjacent Child Watch program. And we're going to be working with our program head of early childhood education programs, and we're endeavoring to secure student workers to help with the Child Watch program. This will help them gain experience in working with young children while also supporting their academic journeys. We're hopeful that we can show that this model works and potentially build a broader Child Watch program for the future. Throughout this project, and while I have been working in this role, the need for basic student-parent data has been a constant. As most of us know, FAFSA data is highly unreliable. In Virginia, we lack a reliable data collection tool for all institutions of higher education. We cannot connect with who we do not know. To that end, in recent months, I have been working with HCM strategists to move forward a bill in the Virginia legislature that will allow student parents to self-identify as parents through a mechanism that is suited to each institution's needs. The State Council for Higher Education in Virginia will be the arbiters of this data for full reporting purposes. Currently, the legislation has passed the House and is in the Committee on Education and Health in the Virginia Senate. Student parents will now have the power to tell us who they are and know that they are no longer invisible on their campuses if we can get the Senate to pass the bill. As a former student parent myself, I remember the isolation I felt thinking that I could not share that part of myself or participate in on-campus events and organizations. Even as I was being asked to participate in campus activities, organizations such as the SGA, Phi Theta Kappa, and other opportunities, I couldn't because of my children. Then one day I just said, if you want me to do it, you want my kids too. My boys became a part of the landscape of our campus. PTK, SGA, and other activities, they were there. As a student parent, I remember the feeling that I belonged and was being listened to, even though I was a parent. When I moved into leadership roles at my college, I always made sure to let student parents know that they could bring their kids to events or activities or meetings as they needed to. I wanted to make room for them at our tables so they can achieve their goals like I achieved mine. I personally want to take the opportunity right now to thank Lauren and Teresa for selecting BrightPoint as one of the colleges to work on this project. It has been rewarding and enriching to meet with different colleges from across the country and to hear what they're doing and to know that we are all in this together. I want to thank Jessica and Jabet and Mesman for meeting with us and helping us work through different things. My Brightpoint team, who put in a lot of hours to make everything work seamlessly, and my Greater College Attainment for Parenting Students crew across the state of Virginia for always being a sounding board. This work is incredibly rewarding, and I look forward to continuing all the good that we have started. And now I turn it over to Jabet.
Thanks so much, Katrina. So it is my pleasure. I'm assuming we're going to move on to introducing the College of Menominee. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, so very excited to introduce the College of Menominee, and we have Royal Johnson, who served as the advisory team member, and Winona Elliott is the manager and student resource and disability services, the manager for that area, and I'm just very excited for them to share the work that they did.
Perfect. Thank you. I just like to say POSO. My name is Winona, and I'm the Student Resource Disability Services Manager for the College of the Menominee Nation. So I'd like to say Wawanan for coming to sit with us today and to listen to what we have to share about our journey with this wonderful grant opportunity. One of the things that when we started working on this was we kind of got excited around, doing a lot of programs or activities and trying to bring that connection for students, parents, and their families. But I was only here for a short time, under a year, and even I learned that you have to know your audience, and at this time in their life, they're going to school or working all day and then going to school. And that I quickly found out that I think attending programs in the evening was one of the last things they wanted to do at that point. So we had to get realistic, and we went back to the drawing board, and I started to meet, as I'm developing these working relationships with the current students and student parents, through a lot of discussions, and understanding where a lot of their barriers are and what, about connection and belonging at a college during, their time as raising families. So we decided that we wanted to create a student parent pantry, which is up and running. And that was an area for us to house some baby items, home items, food support if any of our student parents needed that, as well as guardians. We acknowledge that a lot of our student parents are also guardians to their grandchildren, nieces, and nephews. So we always wanted to make sure our language was very inclusive. And we also were able, with that pantry, that's been able to help a number of our student parents who are just, coming from work, going to class, and might need something. And then we also created a student parent relief fund. So this was around financially providing some financial relief to our students, such as paying for childcare bills, utility bills, even some needed a pair of glasses. So we were able to help cover things like that. And if they were needing a gift card for clothing, things like that. So I feel like that has been very helpful for our students, because we know that it doesn't solve everything, but we give them some relief for that for school. And so I also wanted to also talk about our dedicated tutoring and literacy studying spaces. So next door to my office, created a nice little space where there is children's furniture and a baby table, changing table with everything that they need. They don't need to bring in their own stuff. And just that quiet little space if someone is bringing their little one to campus. And we are also now working on another space in the library on campus, hoping to, there's a children's library down there. So we're working to kind of get that going together, and that will be another space that we'll be able to support for our student parents who may need to bring their kids to come to campus, do some studying or class, But we're always looking forward in the future of how we're going to look outwards and bring that support in, because that is what one of the big things here is childcare. So that's been what we've been working on. I also wanted to highlight that I don't work alone here on this. We've had a really good working group here at CMN with faculty, staff, but also student parents as well, who have been really helpful in providing me guidance and some of those what should I do moments. We came together in October for the tribal Menominee tribe has a Halloween event every year, so we put on we set up a booth, and I just want to know we've dressed as the French kisses, so we look like French people dressed like Kiss. So it was great. And that was we got to meet some of the kids that these parents are talking about and worrying about. So that was nice too to keep that interaction. So the research highlighting, as you can see, like it really comes down to, culturally speaking, belonging and hope and meaning and purpose are all those really big things for us. And so I know, it's about being heard. It's about being seen and how you make people feel. So we're always remembering that and talking about that, about, when we open our doors here and our students come in and they have to come in with their kids for, different reasons that, we treat them, we treat everyone like they're our relatives, like they're coming to our home to visit. So that's, you know, and some of the feedback I did get from some of our students just relating to the student parent pantry and all the support, um, some have shared like it feels nice to just to be heard and to get that help. So I feel like that has really gone a long way, in creating these relationships that they know that we're here and that we're here to help. I also wanted to highlight that I am kind of like, I forget who said it in here, but I'm like the liaison too. So, working with the faculty and having those conversations that I've had, like most of our faculty are very supportive. I think when they get concerned as if they might have to tell a parent, like, it might be not ideal for your child to be in this class today. So, but again, having those good working relationships and those connections, I know I can have those conversations and come up with some alternative planning, or, like let's start thinking about that, which we're always doing because we know childcare it's a very heavy barrier. We're always meeting and talking about ways that we can help support our students while we're trying to work this into a system. I'm sorry if I'm going over my time, but the development of the first ever children's on campus policy. So, CMN being a tribal college and a smaller population, again, we're predominantly student working parents. So, you know, we don't have a policy in place. There's one that is existing. So part of my work is, bringing together student parents on campus and with non-traditional and traditional students around that policy. And I really want it to be student parent led and empowered for them to write a good to help write this policy that is going to be very inclusive, culturally safe, and that we can honor and carry that, so that we can keep doing this, and always remembering that children are supposed to be in the circle of our life. And I think that's it.
So I can jump in.
Oh,
So
okay, thanks.
thank you so much, Royal Johnson, faculty member at the University of Southern California. And good morning or afternoon, depending on where you're joining us from. First, let me just say it was a pleasure to work with Winona and her colleagues at Menominee College. I had the privilege of serving as sort of the research scholarly sort of advisor on this project. And, I'll first say that my colleagues and I entered this space first as listeners, recognizing that they are the most sort of knowledgeable about their community and the needs of their students. And we try to work collaboratively to connect insights from research and theory, some of which is my own, to what they endeavor to do through policy and practice. And she mentioned some of the things that they've done already in terms of practice, student pantry, family relief fund. When we think about Maslow's hierarchy of needs for folks who took Psychology 101 back in the day, access to these basic needs are precursor to feeling a sense of connectedness, a sense of sort of belongingness in school. When we think about the investment of dedicated space, it operates as an identity safety cue for a group of students who are prone to experience marginalization already on campus, right? So having space, seeing yourself reflected on campus is even more important. What I'm most excited about is that we're moving now from practice to policy. So practice being what we do, policy, how we institutionalize what we do, right? And so she nodded already to some of the policy changes and how important it is to have students with lived experience informing some of those decisions. So I'll just stop there and just say it was wonderful to be a part of this team. Thank you for having me.
Okay, so now we're going to turn to the research. I'm really excited to share the results of the CBCF initiative with you. I'll be sharing results at the aggregate level, so overall across all of our 3 college partners. And then at the end, I'll be turning to my colleague Mesmin Destin for his thoughts on our findings thus far. So this is the conceptual model that we brought into the CBCF initiative work. So first, we hypothesized that college activities, resources, support, and policies would have a direct impact on parenting student outcomes. What we specifically looked at in this study was different measures of psychological well-being and college persistence. We also hypothesized that this association, this link, could be mediated by how parenting students feel they belong at their college. So today I will be giving evidence on each of these different pathways amongst our parenting student population. So our college partners were really integral into recruiting for our research. So thank you so much to our college partners. In April of 2025, Therese, Jessica, and I each went to our respective sites and we did data collection, but we also just were able to learn more about the college and the community. And it was a really transformative experience, I think, for everyone. So after data collection, we ended up with 175 parenting student surveys across all 3 colleges. 65 of those parenting students, we have their college enrollment records from National Student Clearinghouse, which I'll talk about later. We conducted 5 parenting student focus groups, which were a total of 26 parents, and we had 6 leadership and staff focus groups with 15 total staff across the colleges. And so the results that I'm going to share with you today are mostly focused on the surveys and the focus groups, and I do have one quote from a leadership and staff, but we integrated them more in their individual slide decks. Okay, so overall, on average, parents were 36 years old. So this was kind of surprising when I got to the focus groups. I was like, oh, everybody's my age. So that was actually really fun to talk with them and just kind of like bond about being in our 30s. This was a racially diverse group. Of course, all of our college partners serve different populations, so that makes sense. And on average, children were about 8 years old. So they were mostly school-age children. Some additional demographics, most of our participants were mothers, even though one college did have a notable father participant sample. More than half were either married or in a steady relationship. And thus far, their highest level of education is a high school diploma or a GED, which of course makes sense. Now they're going to the next step, which is community college. But I will say what about the education part was maybe a little surprising to me, but shouldn't have been, is that there were a fair number of people who already had an associate's degree or already had a bachelor's degree, and they were coming back to college to make a change. So most of the participants were first in their family to attend college, and most were eligible for Pell Grants from the federal government. Most participants were employed, so they're going to school and they're working. And if they were working, almost all of them were working full-time jobs. We did ask a couple of different questions about financial hardship, and the student parents reported to us 1/3 of them said that they could not afford rent in the past 6 months. So we have people working, people in school, but a subset of them are facing financial difficulties. So parenting students rated the importance of multiple identities, which you can see alongside to the left. And almost all of the parents across the colleges said that their parental identity was extremely or very important to them, which was far beyond the other types of identities. And all parents brought up managing these multiple identities in the focus groups. So this student from Brightpoint is talking about being a student and a mom. And I'm going to play the quote from this student, and just bear with me. The audio on some of these is not the loudest.
Yes. It's frightening thinking like, I'm gonna go be a student again. And I'm a mom, you know, and I'm a provider and I'm a nurturer, but can I be a student and be all those things?
And these students were talking about basically the simultaneous emotions of you're feeling proud of yourself for going to college, but also fear, right? So this student from Sinclair says it is okay to show up and be loud and proud of who you are. But the student from Brightpoint talks about how nervous they are.
Like it's a ball of nerve. Because just like as a parent and being in this environment, you automatically fall in place. Whether it's welcoming or not, it's just like a stigma that we have in our minds. Like you should have done this 10 years ago.
So these battling ambivalent emotions for our parent participants. Amongst all parents, amongst all focus groups, people really talked about their children being motivators, which is something that Therese brought up as one of our founding principles of CBCF and our two-generation work. So this was just more evidence that children are motivators, not barriers to success. And here we have a father from Sinclair.
I don't want my kids to be first-generation college students. I want to go ahead and break that curse. So that's why it's another motivation for me to go ahead and get it done. So I can give them the blueprint so that they're not struggling the same way I did.
And we have another quote from a student from Brightpoint.
But once I became a mom, it's like, okay, you have a purpose. You're not just living life for yourself. And you have to lead by example. I can't expect them to go out and be great when I'm not living up to my full potential.
And so this statement, you have to lead by example, I think really demonstrates how parents see themselves as role models and how exposure to college is really important for them. So this was the same student in both of these quotes from College of Menominee Nation. And this first quote is when someone role modeled to her mother's friend, and then in turn, she is now role modeling to her child.
My mom went to college, and when she brought me, when I was in high school, I was like in awe. I'm just like, look at all these people. The professor, my mom's friend, for the professor. Oh my gosh, that's so cool. And that just made me want to go to college. Yeah. Okay.
So now that parent is going to college, and she often will bring her child on campus at College of Menominee Nation. And she says, and then when I took her home, she told me, I never realized what you do in school. Your school is different than from my school. And it's like, well, yeah, it's a little bit more of a higher education. And the child says, I cannot wait to get into that. And that's one reason why she's actually wanting to go into community college. Okay, so back to our conceptual model. As you may have imagined, these domains are complex and they are connected in different ways. So we'll be going through each of these pathways. First, I want to show you the connection between college support and how student parents feel they belong in college. Okay, so first starting with how college support is associated with feelings of belonging. The relationship between these two dimensions, support and belonging, is positive, and that student parents who perceive higher levels of support, so as you get higher, you are receiving more support, also report greater feelings of belonging. So this is in a positive direction. And we also, I'll show you another way we could visualize this is that we divided our student parents into those who perceived high support and those who perceived low support, and then looked at their outcomes. And we can see that those who perceived high support from their college in terms of resources and activities, et cetera, had significantly higher feelings of belonging compared to those who perceived lower support. And there was lots of discussion in the focus groups about feeling like they belong or not. So here's one College of Menominee Nation student talking about feeling welcomed.
Throughout the time since I've been here and the comfort level when I found it, made it much more welcoming, opening, a sense of home, I guess, and made me want to continue to come back.
And so thus far, we've also talked a lot about policies and how to create long-lasting, sustainable institutional change. All three of our colleges talking about creating policy, and Royal just talked about policy change as well at the institutional level. And both of our parents and our staff in these focus group talked about the inconsistent, unclear policies. So this Sinclair staff member says, faculty, childcare, and the bureaucracy around having kids on campus, it's as clear as mud. And then this student from College of Menominee Nation says, but once in a while, get an instructor that doesn't understand as far as like missing classes. I found they're a little harder on me than that other person, And it's happened, I can't say a lot, but it's happened quite a few times. And I sit there, well, why? Basically, why is this happening to me? I am eager to continue my education. I am motivated to continue my education. But these policies are harming my feelings of belonging and potentially harming my academic success. So returning to our model, we'll now talk about how college support is associated with psychological well-being, as well as how feelings of belonging is associated with psychological well-being. Okay, so we can see here we have our two groups, high support, low support. On emotional support as an outcome, we see that those who perceive higher support from their college report significantly more emotional support from their social network or their social system compared to those who perceive low support from their college. And we see the same trend when we look at belonging and whether it's associated with emotional support. Greater feelings of belonging, higher emotional support compared to lower feelings of belonging. We see a similar trend with loneliness, and that parenting students who perceive lots of support from their college feel less lonely, significantly less lonely than those who perceive low support from college. We want loneliness to be lower. We don't want loneliness to be higher. And we see the same thing with feelings of belonging, almost the same numbers, higher feelings of belonging, less loneliness compared to lower feelings of belonging. However, this pattern becomes less clear for self-efficacy. And self-efficacy is your ability, to achieve your goals, how your evaluation of yourself in achieving those goals. So we see no significant difference in self-efficacy outcomes for high and low college support. So here there does not seem to be a connection to self-efficacy. But when we look at belonging, we do see that connection, whereas higher feelings of belonging do seem to be associated with greater levels of self-efficacy or believing that you can achieve your goals. We also looked at optimism, which is your positive outlook on your life, and as another measure of psychological well-being, and we did not find any significant differences for either support or belonging on this optimism measure. Okay, so lastly, now we'll look at college support and belonging as it relates to college persistence. And so, like I said, we were able to get 65 college enrollment records of the parenting students who completed the survey. And I can talk more in the Q&A about that process and why there is a discrepancy in the sample size. Because of this smaller sample size, though, this next slide is purely descriptive, and it's very exploratory at this point. So when I say persistence, I mean continued enrollment, and we were looking at very specific terms because they aligned with when we did the survey. So persistence in this case means continued enrollment from spring to fall 2025, spring to summer, or spring and then you graduated. So that's what persistence means. It can also mean completion. So descriptively, it looks like those who perceived higher support from their college had lower rates of persistence or completion compared to those who perceived low support from their college. But when we look at belonging, we see something slightly different. We see that those who said that they really feel like they belong at college have slightly higher rates of persistence compared to those who feel like they don't belong at college. So definitely more research is needed in this area. Again, this data is a small sample size. It's only, we only collected survey data at one time point. We only looked at one term-to-term persistence rate. There's likely other contextual factors going on here that are affecting these persistence rates. So this was our first step, our first foray into whether belonging is associated with persistence for parenting students, but more research is needed, perhaps at the qualitative level. Okay, so in sum, parenting students are juggling multiple identities, but the parent identity always takes priority. And we heard this over and over again. Parents will always put their children first. Thus, their parent identity is always first when in conflict with any other identity. We just have more evidence that children are motivators for parents to be role models, to break intergenerational patterns in family history, and to want to expose their children to the college environment. And there's mixed evidence for our conceptual model for these associations among college support belonging and various parenting student outcomes. And like I said, really more research is needed, and we would love to do more research in this area. And lastly, having these inconsistent, unclear policies, which have become the focus of many of our three college partners, is clarifying those and working on those more, fleshing those out. These unclear policies do affect parenting students' sense of belonging and likely their ability to succeed. And so that was all the research evidence. And so now I will turn to Mesmin, who is an expert in identity and belonging, particularly among marginalized populations in college. So go ahead, Mesmin.
Sure. Thanks, Lauren. That was a really great summary. So I'll just take a few moments to underscore some points that really stand out to me from this work that we've been able to do. The first thing I just want to highlight is, if it isn't clear, everybody on this team was a part of the integral part of the research process at the different institutions and the different levels of advisory. It's a really big deal to collect any data from this group of students who are extremely taxed. So everyone was really thoughtful in helping to develop the approach and the survey and to reach the participants. So it takes a really invested and connected team to do this really exciting work. A couple of the patterns that really stand out to me of this nice contribution is that link between feeling like you're supported by the institution and feeling like you belong at that institution is a really strong, powerful link between a structural circumstance and an individual feeling. So it's nice to see that happening within this particular group and to see that what's happening in the institution is mattering for how students are experiencing it. Then the next piece that's really stands out to me is how that connection, that feeling of belonging is then connected to this important domain of your well-being, feeling like you have emotional support, feeling less lonely. This crisis we have in higher education around well-being and mental health and added stressors of managing a complicated set of demands are surely a group that we want to be looking at their well-being as they're pursuing these goals that are so important to them. And of course, the efficacy and feeling like you can succeed at being part of this as well. And then the last part I wanted to kind of just comment on a little bit is that attempt to link to like actual persistence, right? How is this all connected to students carrying on with their goals? And, right now, as you can probably tell, the work is really preliminary, right? The data we're able to collect and link is limited in a number of dimensions. So we don't want to draw too strong of conclusions from it. But it does suggest a couple of interesting possibilities, right? This notion that those students who are feeling less supported might really still be persisting at high levels is really kind of interesting if that's consistent. And it highlights, I think, in this particular group of students who are parenting that, many of them may likely be combating lots of, structural level challenges, and institutions aren't necessarily able to meet those as much as they could. But these might be the students who are exceptionally motivated to persist for a lot of reasons, even though they know they're not getting all of the support they could likely benefit from. And so that sense of wanting to work through the challenges that students were articulating in the qualitative data is something that is worth learning more about. At the same time, we're still seeing the likelihood that feeling more belonging, even though the institution might not necessarily be doing everything that you want it to do, is mattering in a positive way for persistence. So again, suggestive patterns, more to be looked at, but they're definitely interesting. And as Lauren mentioned, hopefully we have the opportunity to look further into those, especially for this group of students. I think we'll connect now to how this all links to broader issues related to policy and to our colleague Carrie Welton from Trellis Strategies.
Hi, thanks very much, Mesmin, and really great presentation from all of the participants and institutions in the project. I'm really excited to be here. And I didn't have slides. I was just going to chat for a couple minutes and then hand it over for questions. I thought that maybe that would be a good segue, but I'm a policy and systems person. So one of the things that I would like to leave you all with is both taking away the learning from what you heard here from these institutions and what you heard from the parents, and thinking about the systems that parenting students are interacting with simultaneously while they're trying to enroll and complete a credential. So when we think about what those opportunities are, we know good news-ish, I think, that CCampus has been funded in the last appropriations package at the same level that it was before, and the Department of Education is supposed to be required to do another competition. So wanted to flag that for this group, that hopefully we will see CCampus applications open back up soon. Typically that time period is between May and July, but we'll see about that. And then also when we think about childcare supports, in every state, states have significant opportunity to improve the ability of parenting students to receive a childcare subsidy. Right now, only about 6% of parenting students nationwide actually have access to a childcare subsidy, and that's either for participating in education alone or combining education with work. And then similarly, in the Temporary Assistance for Needy Families program, TANF, what we traditionally think of as welfare cash assistance, states have significant opportunity to ensure that that program supports people's ability to pursue school by moving or removing or reducing time limits on education, by improving the educational activities they can participate in. Some states fund need-based aid for parenting students with their TANF dollars. Some states fund wraparound support services. So I think about that ecosystem that should hopefully be surrounding all of these institutions and these students, and all of the ways and examples that we can leverage improving those systems to better support with these institutions and the journey of these parenting students. So that is something you all are interested in learning more about. There's plenty of information out there, probably too much to share in this session, but I'm happy to provide additional information and my contact information if anybody is interested. And Teresa, I'm happy to, if you had any questions you wanted me to address specifically, I'm happy to, but other than that, I'm happy to turn it over for Q&A.
Oh, thanks so much, Carrie. I think we will turn it over to Q&A
Great.
now. I think Steve's going to lead us in that discussion, but please join in any answers for questions that are relevant to policy or anything else of the work you're doing.
Thanks, Therese. And so now we want to open up to Q&A. And so remember to use your chat function to ask a question, and we'll do our best to get to them. So in the meantime, while people are thinking of questions and entering them in the chat, we have a couple of, I actually have a couple of questions I'd like to ask. And so this is for the colleges. So anyone from the three institutions, if you could share what the most important thing that changed for you through this initiative, and it doesn't matter who starts.
Hi, Steve. I can answer that for Brightpoint. For me, what changed really was just opening our eyes more to the barriers that student parents face on a daily basis. Even though I'm a former parenting student myself, I had it a very different than some of my students that I interact with today. Being able to move forward and understand their sense of belonging while they're on campuses has been very important to me. And I believe that understanding that for them makes me a better mentor and leader for them.
I could add a little bit from Sinclair. It's Myra Bozeman. One of the things I thought about that maybe shifted when we first began this process, I think we were thinking a lot about space, like how we're going to use space and how people will see things that we put in space and how those things will change perceptions and that kind of thing. But I think as we got into the process more and started talking to our students and talking to the other institutions, we realized that things need to shift a bit and become a lot more, I guess, comprehensive and being, I guess, more focused on being responsive and more flexible with our students.
Hi, I'll go, Winona from CMN. I feel that in this journey and this opportunity, um, I don't know what the conversations were at one point here at CMN around student parent and policy. But I just feel that this has been such a good opportunity to open that discussion again and to start putting some change.
Thanks. So that's super helpful. There are some questions coming in now. So this is actually a really good one. So this person is from Cincinnati, and they're finding that a lot of their student parents are online. So what are your thoughts about creating that support and belonging for online parenting students? And I'll open that up to anyone who wants to chime in.
For us at Brightpoint, we use Canvas as our LMN, and we have a Canvas shell specifically for our parenting students. I put out a monthly newsletter. I put out just different information through that, so we are able to kind of connect with those students. I also, this is just me, and this is not indicative of everybody else. I understand that. But I make myself available to my students through a Google Voice number so that they can contact me when they need to, because not everything's going to happen 9 to 5, Monday through Friday. And I know that sometimes they just don't have time during the day, or they need a weekend appointment or an evening appointment. So I make those allowances, and I flex out my time so that I can help them when they need it. So I try to meet them where they are and when they need me.
Thanks. I'm curious, Lauren or Therese, do you guys have any thoughts around that? Because I know that's, we could face another, heaven forbid, a pandemic, and then everyone goes online. So have you thought about that at all?
Steve, don't speak it into existence.
Sorry.
Something I was thinking about, which is something our group as a whole has talked about a lot over the past 2 years and is related to Royal's different ecosystems. That he has a great paper on how to improve belonging that I can send to you. I'm sure he'd be happy to send you it too, but he has lots of ideas in there as well as to how to improve belonging at every level. But something that we've talked about a lot is just having basic needs met is is a catalyst for belonging. So it's not, of course, peer groups and having someone you can go to and bringing your kids on campus, like all of that is so amazing. But also just like having your needs being met by your college in some way can also improve belonging. So figuring out how to do that from afar, I think could also improve our virtual students' feelings of belongingness.
Actually, Steve, I do want to comment on this because Winona, we had some really interesting conversations with you and some of your faculty members about how during the pandemic, how there was actually for your nation as a whole, like a complete shutdown. And then the college itself, there was such strong restrictions that nobody could bring their kids anywhere near campus. And there was a holdover from that. And so there got to be this really interesting conversation about, when we're talking about childcare needs, and I think Katrina, you even mentioned, or somebody did mention about how having flexibility and be able to take classes online when you have a childcare need, there became this conundrum that people were able, when it became virtual learning, to in some ways better support their children's needs because they were at home and so they didn't have to physically be in class, but at the same time they weren't getting the connection with parents that they also use for emergency needs. Like the connectivity is part of how they help each other in school and how they help each other with childcare needs. And so there's this tension between this isolation and this flexibility. So I think it's a really critical and important issue and really important going forward as we continue to balance hybrid and virtual learning.
I think at Sinclair, we talked about this early on, but we didn't actually implement any of it. We talked about having like Zoom dance parties with, kids and parents. And we talked about having study, like read-alongs and those kinds of things, movie night. We had a lot of really great ideas because we really believed in the idea that our students needed to be connected, not just on campus, but also an online presence as well. But we just never got around to it. I think I know we had a newsletter, those kinds of things, but the great ideas we had never quite made it, off of the paper for us.
So I'm happy to chime in here also. One, the same sort of intentionality that requires creating belonging sort of in face-to-face setting is required in the online sort of setting as well, right? Students who are online learners are more prone to experiencing a sort of institutional invisibility, and they frequently talk about and report feeling like customers and not really integrated into the campus community. There's something like if their only touch point to the campus is through the link through the LMS system, then they're not likely to experience a high sense of connectedness to the community. Folks have experimented with cohort models online and connecting students to peers. We think about more proactive advising approaches for online students and not just waiting for students to seek out help. There are lots of campuses that have experimented with virtual affinity groups and identity spaces. You mentioned, Myra, having online dance parties. How are we reimagining and thinking about leveraging digital spaces for connection and community in the same way? Online graduation experiences and virtual sort of rituals and that are part and custom of the campus that students still get to participate in via online are just some of the examples that come to mind.
No, thank you. That's great information. And I do think that, as educators, we need to kind of adapt to these new situations that occur. So here's a question that, having worked at a community college and understanding some of the bureaucracy that you have to go through to make some institutional changes. This question is specifically for Sinclair. How hard was it to add a parental status question to your SIS or student intake?
I can go ahead and take that one. So honestly, not hard at all.
Okay.
It was a push from our one of our vice presidents to have that a part of the intake survey for our students. So it is built into the student experience. So we use a student information system software called EAB Navigate. And once a semester, the intake survey will pop up, asking the student status and confirming how they're identifying, and then other various questions that we have to connect them to resources. And we're still newly implementing the system, but one other thing that we want to start to leverage are like quick polls. So if there's a certain time of the semester where maybe we see potential drop off or any other concerns that are popping up, where we can send out a quick poll to our students and ask them, hey, do you need help with X? And they can say yes or no. And then from there, it generates a list of students that we can reach out. too. So it's kind of a collective effort. But honestly, we've had a lot of support from upper administration to identify our student parents, because as Katrina said, how else are we doing it? So definitely a lot of support with that.
And I think
Yeah.
I'm sorry to just add a little bit more. I think some of that support is because of the initiative, and because Myra and Allie and the committee have been so visible and they have worked so hard to get the data out there that now they have this support. But I think without that foundation, it would have probably been more bureaucratic than just adding a question.
No, I think that's super important, especially having that leadership buy-in. So this next question is sort of related to this. So all the colleges that were part of this project had already been in the parenting student space doing some work on campus. So this was nothing new. But if you are looking to start an initiative for parenting students, what is the best way to reach them, given the challenges of identifying student parents that most colleges face? They don't necessarily have this way to collect it as part of their SIS. Anybody? It doesn't matter. It's not targeted. So
I can take that. This is Jabet Lozapone here. One of the things, in reflecting in my experience at Montgomery College, which is where I served as an administrator in student affairs, there's a couple of ways you can go about this, right? So we know that we can, historically, we've been able to look at FAFSA data. That's changed, right, in recent time. But historically, we've been able to look at FAFSA data, find individuals with dependents, send them an email, have your financial aid folks send an email as an example. The other thing that you can do is we've had self-identification processes where we've done it a couple of different ways. We've done it where we only sent it, again, like a very specific self-identify and confirm for us, and, be a little bit more specific to provide us how many children, what are their ages, that sort of thing. And we've either sent that directly to those individuals that have dependents identified in FAFSA, or we've actually done a college-wide survey that we've worked with our institutional advancement team, the data folks, to actually work with advancement and community engagement, who are the marketing and communications folks, to send out a survey to the entire college population, including very specific programs in workforce development and continuing education, those types of programs that you have students there for a longer time as opposed to coming in for a day, and then all of the degree programs. So those are a couple of ways that you can go about it in terms of self-identification. I think Sinclair has done a phenomenal job. The fact that they were very quickly able to add that question. I can tell you that at Montgomery College, we've been working on that for 6+ years. And it is easier for some institutions than others, but it can be done. But it should not be an excuse to not begin collecting student parent data, because it can be done, albeit in a very roundabout way. You're not going to have all the information, but some data is better than no data, and often can help you build the case to say, and this is why we need to systematize this process.
No, that's super helpful. This next question is for Teresa and Lauren. Is there a standard or a set of standard survey questions that are published or that you use that the audience or the attendees could look at for student parent belonging in relation to self-efficacy, psychological well-being, and related measures? So I guess, is there a template?
Well, we know we've promised that we will put out a product that summarizes all our learnings, and the survey elements will be part of that. Lauren, I can't remember what we called that, a brief and something.
Yeah, some sort of report, but the measures that we use are all validated measures that you can access. So we will be naming those and their source in the report. Yes.
Perfect. That's awesome. Okay, so this question, I'm going to do my best because the person that asked this told me to paraphrase. So it is around those that were perceived regarding the finding that those who perceived high support were less likely to persist. They wonder if it's because those who perceived high support did have high needs for that support. So on the one hand, they were in a caring school and they had the support they needed, but it just wasn't sustainable for them. For example, someone may have needs for extra tutoring in many classes and the school was able to provide, but the person just couldn't do it because of the parenting and other responsibilities. It's a very long question, so sorry.
Yeah. No, I saw that, Fett. Thank you for joining. I saw that. I think that is totally a possible explanation. So just that those who perceive high needs are those who have high needs. And if you have high needs, you might be less likely to persist for a number of different reasons. So I think that totally could be an underlying mechanism for why we see these trends. I think really we need more data to get really at the heart of it. And like Misman said, I think qualitative interviews with our parenting students would really help with that as well. So thank you.
Note the sample size issue is very real, and we want to be able to address that. It's a very small subsample of the 175. If we'd had 170 and 175, I think we could feel on stronger footing with some of those findings. But I think we really have to look at them as quite preliminary. And Lauren, do you want to just mention some of the issues around being able to identify in the national?
Yeah, so the issue was that when you submit student names to National Student Clearinghouse, National Student Clearinghouse will get all of the college records that they can and transfer them to you, but you really need to have their birthday. So we did ask parenting students for their birthday on the survey, and unfortunately, 2/3 of them wrote down the date of the survey instead of their birthday. So I had a bunch of people who were born in 2025 taking the survey. So that was really the issue. And National Student Clearinghouse says you don't need the birthday, but you really do. So just FYI for anyone out there, you need as full of a name as you can get, plus their birthday.
So it's just saying, if we had had the birthdays, we would be in much stronger footing. We thought that was going to be the case. And we just have to have greater clarification in the survey of what that date was about and a way to check it.
Yep.
So live and learn.
Yep.
Okay, thank you. This one, I think there was an institution that had a C campus grant, but the question was if you're coming up on the final year of your grant, do you write a new grant or what is there a renewal process? What does that look like? And Carrie is not on the call anymore, so
she's not. She would have been our best person.
Yeah, I'm happy to.
I think it was Allie mentioned having one.
We do, but as far as my knowledge, I don't, Myra.
This person's not on the call, so I don't have that information to share.
Yeah, I think we can try to answer that.
Yeah.
Via email or chat or something. So, does anyone have any other questions? Those are the only ones that have come in so far. We have time for probably one or two more.
Steve, do we want to ask a question of our belonging experts? I think we had one of those.
Yes, sorry. Yes. So, okay. So yes, this is a good, this is a question that I've also thought about. So this is from Mesman or Royale. What is similar or different about belonging for marginalized students compared to parenting students?
I can get us started on that one. I think, there's obviously a lot of overlap and similarities in experience. I think when you think about this category of marginalized, whether students of color or lower income students, some students may be more likely than students who are parenting to have not just a strong identity around this, but a strong kind of group identity. Like you're really connected to people around that identity in a way that being a parenting student can be more isolating, typically. And being able to cultivate that community is going to look different and having those subgroups. I think as has been mentioned, obviously parenting students are also less likely to have this time on campus in the traditional kind of way that people think about the college experience and maybe less visible in certain types of ways. So there's just these nuances in addition to a lot of overlap. Many parenting students may have intersecting marginalized identities and are navigating all of this together. So I think it's important to keep in mind how these are related and linked, but there are kind of specific experiences, and to me it's an opportunity, and why it's exciting to have a focus on this group of students because it's a real opportunity where there's not always as much attention to their experience of belonging as with other groups of students, and so there may be more room to really augment their experience. I don't know, Royal, if you had other thoughts.
No, I think that was perfect. I mean, if you think about marginalization being connected to sort of structural manifestations that operate as barriers, and student parents can carry a range of marginalizing identities that intersect and create unique sort of barriers as well. So it's hard to kind of parse it in that way because we don't live single identity lives, and we're always sort of at the intersection of race, gender, sexual orientation, whether or not I have kids, et cetera. And so, yeah, I would just think about the constellation of one's identities and how they're connected to structural forces that are shaping institutional policy and practices, cultural norms, et cetera.
Thanks. That's super helpful. I know there's a lot of work that crosses over both those populations. So I think I want to end on a question for Therese. So what's something about your research on belonging that college leaders and administrators should know? We know that buy-in is important. We know that this is a important student demographic. So if you were speaking to college leaders and administrators, what would you tell them?
I would tell them that belonging is essential to everyone at the individual level, at the institutional level, the faculty level, the policy level, and that something we learned in this initiative is how important belonging was to everyone. I mean, I think one of the best outcomes of this work that colleges can speak themselves is the community that they brought together of leaders in this movement. They often feel isolated themselves as those working on parenting students, and this helped create a sense of community and learning among them. And I actually just want to give a shout out. I didn't mention that I was the group that worked with the College of Menominee Nation. And if there's ever an example of a community that brings a sense of belonging, even as I was able to go to the college itself, they were willing to spend almost an entire day showing me every aspect, both of the tribe and of the college and of the intersection between the two. And so I just want to emphasize that belonging is something that isn't just a feeling, but that feeling is essential, and it is impacted by policy, program, institution, peers, et cetera. And so it's integral to all the work that a college does.
Absolutely. And so with that, I want to thank all of our panelists and guests and all of you for attending today and joining us for this important conversation. As Teresa mentioned, institutions and presidents are faced with so many different priorities. So the research like this is critical to make sure they are aware of this population on their campuses and then help them understand why they should prioritize these students. This is such important work, and I'm glad we were able to share it with you today. So as a reminder, we will be sending out the recording and the slide deck to those who registered, as well as posting it on our website. So thank you and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thanks, everybody.